Welcome to Crisis of Infinite Opinions. I am your host, Honey. On this show, we cover various topics of debates in the comic book community, where each of us gives our own stake on the matter, but secretly one of us is the Bizarro, who has the wrong take. To my left is Miranda.
Hi, I'm DinoMightyMiranda, your friendly neighborhood amateur Batman historian. Directly under me is Night the Werewolf Teacher.
Hi, I'm Night the Werewolf Teacher. I'm a fake werewolf and real teacher, and to my left is Rena, aka Rock Arfrey.
Hi, my name's Rena, Rock Arfrey on TikTok. I make way too long videos on way too short a platform.
Yes, so today's topic, we are discussing the return of kid sidekicks. Long time ago, kid sidekicks used to be everywhere. They're not too common nowadays, and we are discussing whether or not they should return. In my opinion, I'm going to be arguing that not really. I think kid sidekicks have kind of worn out their welcome at this point. They've told some great stories back in the 40s and the 60s and 70s, but there's not enough actual writers nowadays who really know how to actually write a kid sidekick versus a kid superhero, that it just doesn't really translate very well in the modern medium.
That is fair. However, I think that kid sidekicks add such a wonderful dimension to comic books and to specifically larger franchise superheroes, right? So like Batman, Superman, The Flash, etc. With child sidekicks, you get the ability to change your audience, right? You can tell stories that appeal to a mature audience. You can tell stories that appeal to general audiences. And then with kids sidekicks, you can do something that you really can't do as well with adult superheroes, where you can tell stories that appeal specifically to children. Children generally don't identify with adults. Children identify with other children or talking animals. And that is from an industry perspective, I think that is really vital for having these characters who have been around for generations to continue to be around for generations more.
I personally really do like kid sidekicks. For a lot of the same reasons that Miranda has, I'll also add in that from a storytelling perspective, that one of the reasons that Robin was introduced was to give Batman someone to talk to, so that he could actually have all those I'm the smartest person, the best detective in the world, kind of so you could actually hear what he was saying, and his thoughts spoken out loud.
I'm going to go for a more simple answer. I think they're fun. I think superhero comics should be fun. And I think that, kid sidekicks are stupid and silly and laughable. And those are all things I want in my superhero comics. And I don't really believe in the actual, Batman was so much dark without a Robin. But I do legitimately think that when it's a kid sidekick is there, you got to have, the hero's got to make it out in the end, And I think that I think that sidekicks in general have fallen by the wayside, and kid sidekicks are just they're fun and they're cute and they're marketable and they're all the good things about superhero comics.
I have to since I seem to be the outlier here, I have to just bring up that we are capable of having stories featuring child superheroes without them having to explicitly be sidekicks. We've had the Young Champions, we have Moon Girl being around as a superhero. It is very easy to just tell stories nowadays that are just about teenage superheroes, that we don't explicitly need to have them be the sidekicks to other superheroes a lot of the time.
That is a fair point, and that is great, but I think that sidekicks are really good for bridging the gap, right? Because a sidekick is a character that could potentially be with you for multiple phases of your life, right? I was 10 years old when I started reading superhero comics. I didn't give a shit about Batman. You know who I gave a shit about? Robin.
That explains why you loved him, Drake.
It is. He was the Robin when I started reading.
I just mean both you and him were nah, no Batman. Robin's the one.
Yeah, because the Robins are so much cooler, and they have more fun than Batman, and they don't growl. Right? And so I started reading with Robin, with Teen Titans, with the kid superheroes, right? But Robin has always been a sidekick to a certain degree. You can sort of debate what sidekick means when a character is mainlining their own they headlining their own comic book. Not mainlining, goodness me. Right? You can debate what sidekick means when a character is headlining their own comic series. But Robin is traditionally a sidekick, and it was my interest in the Robins that led to me reading more Batman, even when I didn't really like Batman very much. And then as I grew up, my interest in like these side characters led into further interests, sort of spiraling outward into adult characters, especially as I entered adulthood. Right? Like it is a sidekick for me was like that was the gateway that led me to adult superheroes as I grew up. Whereas when you have characters that are just kid superheroes, those are fun stories. Those are fabulous stories. I'm not saying those shouldn't exist. They absolutely should. I really enjoyed Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. But it is, but it is a lot easier to make the jump from being a kid reading comic books that are written for kids to being a teenager reading comic books written for teenagers to being an adult reading comic books written for adults, if you have characters that are there to help bridge the gap.
I think, okay, to throw Honey a lifeline here, on the other side of it, I think at least DC is really bad at writing sidekicks right now, in that they're not sidekicks. I think there's something to say that the current Robin is Tim Drake, a full-grown adult who really to move on, and meanwhile Ian is like all on his own. Like he's like in his own book. Or the same thing with like Kid Flash, where like a huge part of it is a huge amount of tension. He was in like Speed Force opposite like Avery Ho. Like he very rarely is actually a sidekick with Barry. Like I think just during Rebirth was the main arrow of that. And I think that like if you're not going to, I don't like this like middle position here. Like I'm fine with sidekicks headlining their own book, right? But I don't like this weird thing where like you say they're a sidekick, but they never do sidekick behaviors. Exactly. I'm not a fan of that. At that point, just make a teenage square. And I also think it's kind of weird where you create what is clearly a diminutive of the main hero, but has like isn't palling around with the main hero. I think like it's weird for Kid Flash not hang out with Flash. That's my 2 cents on the matter. I can't remember the last time Cassie Sandsparks and Diana hung out, to be honest.
No, Cassie like appears as a sidekick for like a few issues in the beginning, and it's not that she's Wonder Woman's sidekick, it's more, hey, there's this girl dressing up as Wonder Woman who is kind of like running around helping Diana out sometimes, and then she's shipped off to Young Justice and she doesn't really hang out with Wonder Woman anymore.
Now, I was also thinking about where I see a lot of more use for those sidekick characters, and it is in titles like Action Comics and Detective Comics, although haven't been used lightly in Detective Comics, mostly because of Ron V's ongoing Gotham Nocturne. But like,
has a vision. Let the man cook.
Oh no, it is absolutely amazing, and he is giving like Cassie some really good time. You know, so like I'm not discounting that, but like in Action Comics, like you've got the Super Family doing a lot of the a lot of stuff. You've got the Super Twins, who are our newest sidekicks, and I think I would like to see more family books. You know, more like I've always said that like if I were in charge of editorial at DC, I would immediately greenlight an ongoing series for each of the major superheroes who have like an established family of things to be like the Action Comics and Detective Comics runs. You know, have a Wonder Comics run, have a Flash family run. I think we've gone with Quick Comics as the title for that one. Although Flash
Comics,
although Cy Spurrier has been doing a really good job of using the entire Flash family in his run.
I will make a point that no one seems to have brought up at all, and that's the sliding timescale that comes with trying to create a kid sidekick, especially in the modern day. This is why I made the emphasis that they can't come back now as a central focus, because back in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 80s, if you had a kid sidekick, they were going to grow up, and the superhero was actually going to get older. Hal Jordan was going to get gray in his hair. Superheroes were actually going to get older. Nowadays, they're never going to actually grow up. And so you have this awkward situation where Tim Drake is perpetually either 16 or 19, depending on the writer. Damien is bordering on getting older than Tim at this point, and Dick Grayson is still not being allowed to actually be written as as a middle-aged man at this point. He's still being written as if he's in his late 20s when the man should be in his late 30s by now. It's like these characters are not allowed to age up, but they still perpetuate if we try to give sidekicks to these characters, if we try to give Dick Grayson a sidekick, and then Dick Grayson's sidekick grows up, but Dick Grayson is still in his mid to late 20s.
Counterpoint. That's really funny, though.
It is funny. It is funny, and I do live in perpetual horror of the day that Damien becomes older than Tim, like, genuinely, as a historian. But I would argue that's why kid sidekicks need to come back. That's why we need more of them, because I think kid sidekicks force time to move forward, right? Because the kid does eventually have to grow up. They can be a kid for a decade, but at a certain point they have to become a teenager, and then they have to graduate into adulthood. And I think that forces everyone else to grow up with them. For a very long fucking time, Batman was 28. And it's like Batman was not allowed to age with Dick Grayson. Batman was stuck at 28 when Dick Grayson was like bibbidi-bobbidi booped into 18. And that led to such a weird dynamic between them. But because of all of the Robins, because there's now so many goddamn children circling Batman constantly, that forced them to move him from 28 until now he's like ambiguously late 30s, early 40s.
The problem is just that we have proof that it's not working that way, because Damien is almost getting to be older than Tim, and he still hasn't grown up.
No, but that's Tim. That's not Batman. Batman has been forced to age, which means eventually Tim will be forced to age.
So we have to give Tim Drake a kid sidekick.
You guys remember how when freaking in the opening of like Jeff Johns' Justice Society, he sets up a new timeline for like Batman, in which Bruce has been Batman for less years than Damien has been alive.
Yes.
And like, look, they're always going to be wishy-washy with time, and I do think that that way leads madness, you know? Like, none of us are correctly adjusted, and I think it's partially because we all at some point decided to try and figure out a timeline for comic books.
Yep.
And it just didn't work out.
I got actually pretty well. I got all the way to Crisis, and then I crashed.
I'm okay with Damien being conceived while Bruce is on his training arc.
Not.
You know?
No. I think that Damien, like, bare minimum, has to have been conceived after Dick Grayson is Robin.
Yeah.
I think for me, the reason why I need him to be conceived is because that's like the kid of Batman and Talia.
Yeah, he's not Bruce Wayne's kid. He's Batman's kid.
Yeah, and like if it's not the kid of Batman and Talia al Ghul, it's just like, first of all, I don't think Talia, like Bruce Wayne's still a fuckboy during his training arc. I don't think Talia would like.
No. Talia is not dating emo goth heartthrob Bruce Wayne. That is Zatanna's boy. Baby Bruce Wayne is dating Zatanna. Adult Bruce Wayne is dating Talia.
Oh,
why are you putting that on Zatanna? Why does she have to have shitty taste in men?
She already has shitty taste in men. She's dating Constantine.
I know. I want better for her. She should have she should talk to Talia. They should go to get lunch.
Yeah, but like she that's a growing up arc, you know.
Yeah.
You gotta start from somewhere.
She had shitty male love interests back in the day. She still kind of has shitty male love interests now, and maybe eventually she'll date somebody good.
But
I get that. I just don't think that like the Knight Bruce Wayne should be forced upon anyone.
Anyway, different topic. I'm going.
I think that this way. I think like we are like kind of flipping a coin here, because as likely as it is that you force a character to grow up, you're also maybe just making a perpetual 12-year-old, you know?
Look at Franklin Richards. Look at the Power Pack.
Look at that. The concept of a sliding time scale is invented because of characters like that.
Yeah.
Like, in all honesty, kid characters, it's why we have a sliding time scale in the first place, because kids clearly need to age, and that makes superheroes grow up. You could have a non-sliding time scale with this vague sense of time and have like characters grow up, but now everything has to be 50 to 20 years in the past.
I think what we have to do is we have to take a lesson from soap operas, and we have to send the kid to boarding school for a couple of arcs, and then let them come back older, and everyone else is allegedly the same age.
So Tim Drake with the Teen Titans, Dick Grayson with the Teen Titans.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I'm gonna fight about Tim Drake till the day that I die, because they gave him so many opportunities to change and to grow up, and then they kept changing the writer, and the writer would just be like, well, I'm not gonna what am I gonna do, read the other guy's notes? Ha 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 ha, what do you take me for?
I literally made a video.
I can't read.
If we discussed the different ages of teenagers coming out at different points, but does the age of a teen sidekick actually really matter? Is there a difference when the sidekick debuts as an older teen or as a younger child?
Yes, because children are very dumb. And I mean that with love in my heart. They're not dumb, they're inexperienced, all right? Like, we all know children, right? And I'm thinking about the recent bad Green Lantern arc, not this current one, but the one before it, in which Joe has to look after Teen Lantern. And Teen Lantern gets into all kinds of trouble because she's a kid and doesn't know any better. And, like, if you had, like, even a person Tim's age or older, then like they would have a concept of stakes and like danger and like all these things that children who think they're invincible do, you know?
Yeah, I think about Maps Mizuguchi, who just keeps getting herself into just like incredibly dangerous situations.
There's also the problem of teenage sidekicks is it very much depends on what type of teenager. If we're talking like a 15-year-old teenager and they're still a sidekick to another, like if they're debuting as a sidekick to another a superhero, that's a fine line to cross because there's a lot of agency that teenagers have at that point that makes it difficult for them to play the supporting role that has to play yes man to the adult, the older superhero. Like Rocket, there's a lot of times in Rocket's run where she's not really a sidekick. It's more of just a two-man act play where she and Icon are, like, often Rocket is more the actual superhero of Icon and Rocket. And so, am I wrong there? Am I wrong? Is she not the...
No. I'm just resisting the urge to gush about Icon. Like, they say at a certain point that Raquel is Icon. Like,
yeah.
Icon moves for space, he says that. Like, it's her idea for them to do that. But I think that itself kind of shows the purpose of the sidekick. Because the reason why Rocket's there is to, like, one, cause problems for the plot, and two, also, like, provide a perspective that Icon otherwise wouldn't have. And that isn't just, like, laid bare in the book. That is explicitly spelled out as the motivation to have Rocket as a sidekick. And I think that's why you can still categorize Rocket as a sidekick, despite her also being Icon's partner. Because while Raquel may be Icon, it might be Raquel's idea, Rocket as a legacy exists to do the things a sidekick does, to encourage confrontation in places where there might not be confrontation, to encourage perspectives that an old crotchety man like Augustus would never have, you know?
I agree. Actually, what you were getting at reminded me of the fact that kids are idealistic. Kids very much believe that the world should be good and fair. You know, kids are often far more moral than adults, and so I think it is important to have that in the story. You know, I was not a kid sidekick, but I was reminded of the videos about Prez, the teen president. All right, who was created after teenagers got the right to vote, and the creators of Prez were like, well, who's supposed to say they wouldn't vote to change the age where you can become president? But Prez, as a character, does a lot of good stuff. And, like, refuses to listen to the, like, big evil lobbyist, Mr. Smiley. And like, because there's this idea here that the kids are, generally speaking, good people and would want to change the world in a better way. And so, and like, yeah, thinking in terms of like, as you said, Icon and Rocket, like Rocket forced Icon to teach her, to make her a superhero. It's like, you have all this ability, all this power, all these resources, and you're not using them.
This reminds me, actually, because I've been currently reading the Giffen's Justice League International era, and came across Shiloh Norman taking over the mantle of Mr. Miracle from Scott Free. And Shiloh is an 18-year-old sidekick. Like, he's explicitly being written as somebody trying to take the mantle and be a legacy character, but the relationship in the story is, this is Scott Free's book still, he's still actually Mr. Miracle, he just has this 18-year-old black kid running around with him, also dressed up as Mr. Miracle. And it reads very weirdly because he's supposed to be, he's basically an adult at this point. He is 18 years old, but he still has the immaturity and behavior of what you would expect from, like, a 13-year-old kid, because he's still being written as a sidekick to Mr. Miracle.
Well, I think that kind of proves the point that the age does matter then, right? That an adult can be written in a way that feels off for an adult because they're trying to fill the role of a younger person, which kind of proves the point that, like, you can't really fill that void with partners or sidekicks that are older, you know? Like, it just doesn't fit the same mold.
So I do think that age matters. I work with kids, and I work with elementary age kids, and I am here to tell you that, having known many an 8-year-old, 8-year-olds should not be sidekicks. They are too fucking young. They are too young. They are small, and they're not stupid, right? They're not stupid. They're developmentally appropriate for an 8-year-old, but they should not be out. They should not be doing anything.
Now
right? Like, I'm not even really certain 8-year-olds should be allowed to walk down the street. I
really want an 8-year-old sidekick now. Like,
well, that's how I headcanon Dick Grayson be when he debuts. I always consider him 18 when he debuts, or 8 when he debuts.
I can't. I have a little brother, and when my little brother hit 8 years old, I looked at him and I was like, oh my god, he should never be Robin. But, like, when my little brother hit 12, I was like, he should still never be Robin, but also he can do shit now. Well, so, like 12 is my sweet spot.
Well, the answer for, like, that kind of folds in the question of why are there kid sidekicks at all? And the answer is always, I mean, it's supposed to be like, you can't stop them. Like,
no, you can't.
Like, it's very rare.
Children.
Like,
they are children who have basically said, well, you know, stop me.
Yeah, like, they need what. So, like, I think similarly, you can have the same thing of, like, I don't want an 8-year-old fighting crime, but, like, they're going to do it. Also, we were talking about age, and this kind of reminds me of an issue that's similar to what I was talking about before, which is every older sidekick is, like, defined by rebellion. Mm-hmm. And, like, we talked about before, or, like, I think not on, like, recording, that, like, the Teen Titans are all squares. They all, like, you need to be a massive square to fight crime. And, like, so every teenage sidekick is like, oh, I can't be with you. I gotta, like, do my own thing. And it gets kind of redundant to me. And I think the reason why is because you gotta, like, not make them lame.
No, well, that's also part of, like, I think that's a twofold problem, right? Part of it is, like, the fantasy of, like, the child sidekick, right? The child sidekick in part exists so that younger readers can see themselves in the book and will spend more money on it, right? But the child sidekick also, and so because of that, there is sort of a function of the child sidekick where they have to be, especially from, like, the 90s on, where they have to be, like, the childhood ideal, right? There's a reason why Tim Drake rode, like, a skateboard, you know, and got macked on by a bunch of girls. It's because that was part of the fantasy, right? But you also have people who write child sidekicks who are not children, and, you know, like, some of them are very far removed from children. Some of them don't have children of their own. They don't have, like, real life examples of children they can pull from. And so what you end up with is this very sort of this caricature of what a teenager is like, where it's just like, I think teenagers are difficult, so clearly my teenage sidekick character is going to be just the biggest asshole on earth.
But the thing is also is that dynamic of like Damian Wayne, especially when he's written in the late 2000s, when he is the biggest dick, the brattiest little annoying piece of shit ever, and he has that dynamic with Stephanie Brown. That is what a child acts like. That is an actual child there. It's not... But is that an ideal fantasy for a kid reading Batman comics? Are kids actually...
No, Damian was not written to be part of that fantasy. You can tell when you read like how Grant Morrison speaks about Damian, that Damian was not written to fulfill that role.
So if Damian Wayne, as written by Grant Morrison, is the modern 2000s equivalent of what a kid's sidekick is, but they're not being written as the child wish fulfillment fantasy that Dick Grayson and Tim Drake were, what is the actual purpose that Damian Wayne is serving as a sidekick and not just a supporting character who is his kid?
Well, I think that's like the purpose that Damian's served with Dick Grayson as a sidekick, right? Where there were a lot of times where Damian was sort of the motivation for Dick Grayson to do what he did because he needed to be the better example, right? He needed to reparent this child. And I think that is sort of one aspect of the child sidekick, right? It's that we talked about like their purpose as like a helpmeet, but the child sidekick also serves a purpose in terms of how the hero themselves behaves, right? It forces the hero into the role of mentor. Sometimes that's like just like a strict teacher relationship. Sometimes that's a familial relationship, right? And it adds a new dimension to that character, that they have this character that they're going to be with for quite a bit of page time, who that they are now forced into a relationship with.
Feeling of reading comics as a kid, we've been discussing how kid sidekicks are wish fulfillment for them. Does reading stories about teenage crime fighters feel different now that we are adults reading them as opposed to when we were kids?
100%.
Yeah.
But like, also, I mean, a big one is just like what I remember. There was a tweet I still think about where someone was like reading the Percy Jackson series for the first time and is like, Luke has a couple points, but he's like going about it the wrong way. And then after you have a kid, it's like Luke should have burned Olympus to the ground. Where like, you, as an adult, all you can think is, where are your parents at every point of the time? Like, all you could be hyper aware of, like, the degree of danger. And also, like, I think kids, I know I just said kids are dumb, but also kids are not stupid. And I think they notice when teenagers are being overly rebellious for no reason. But I think, like, a lot of them will be like, why is that? And then as an adult, you're like, no, this kind of fits with how I was as a teenager. Like, it's like whenever I ride the train as an adult and we cross by a school and all the teenagers get on, I was like, God, was I this loud and obnoxious as a kid? Like, was I just not aware of other people's, like, space or comfort on the train? And similarly, it's like, yeah, you're kind of needlessly rebellious for no reason.
But also, I think that there's a level of adults, going back to the Damian thing, regarding teen sidekicks in general, if a teenage sidekick is ended up being written as an actual, like, a rebellious, angry, angsty teenager, there's a lot of adults who suddenly turn on that they otherwise liked as kids. Like, there's a lot of kids, people who grew up reading Tim Drake and liked Tim talking back to Batman and being kind of hormonal and rebelling. But then you get to people who grew up reading that stuff, coming into the 2000s, coming into the 2010s, reading, like, Damian, reading Lorzod in Rebirth era, reading Quentin Quire in the X-Men comics, and hating them because they don't actually remember what being a kid was like.
Well, there's also a lot of adults that just don't like children in general. Yeah. And rather than say, I just don't like kids, they say, well, kids are so much ruder now. And it's like, no, kids change, of course, generation to generation, but it's like, it's not that. It's that you don't like kids and you are afraid to say it, like, Daphne, I don't get off your high horse.
I think it stems from a lack of empathy, like a lack of understanding that children's problems, while different, are, like, reasonable, and especially if you don't understand or don't think that's a real problem, that's because you have the tools as an adult to deal with it that you need to learn, and like children and teenagers don't necessarily have that. And I think when they use that lack of empathy, it just becomes like they want children to be mini adults, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say, thinking back on my life, it is hard to imagine myself as a child. Like, I can imagine the things that happened when I was a child. I can think of those things, and yet I always think of myself as having the same amount of cognitive ability as I do now, despite knowing that that is definitely not the case. I also want to go back to what Rena said about, looking back at things. Like, there was another tweet or something that says, like, reading as a kid is like, oh my, like, I look at all these kids going on adventures. It's so cool. And reading as an adult, like, why are all these child soldiers here?
That is the thing. I think that's why you said you have to not be able to stop them, because if you can stop them, then it's your fault.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to stop them if you can. And yeah, it's but yeah, like, as an adult, as someone who is responsible for children, because I'm also in education, like, it is really hard to read stories where kids are in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have to ask the question. Three of us are like, we want kid sidekicks. When you say kids, like, who do you want to have a kid sidekick?
Yeah,
like,
that's another important point, because, like, if we're the point of the question is not do we like kid sidekicks. Every one of us has a kid sidekick that we all like. The question of the matter is, should kid sidekicks be brought back as a thing? And so you have to ask, which superhero are you actually wanting to get a sidekick to run around with them?
Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Elaborate.
Yeah. Like,
Okay. So I think a key aspect of, like, Wonder Woman's character, and it's one that does get dropped in a lot of different interpretations of her, but she is as a character, she's very cognizant of her responsibilities as, like, a role model and as, like, a mentor towards other women and girls. And I think that leads very naturally into her having like a kid sidekick, her having a bunch of, like, teenagers that she's mentoring, right? Like, I think that leads very nicely into her serving that function with other characters. And I really wish that we would get that with her more, right? Like, in the 40s, you have, like, the Holiday Girls, who are college-age women, but she's very much like she's like the dead mother of their group, right? And she is, like, supporting them, and she is helping them find their way as, like, girls growing up into women, into, like, strong, like, realized women in their own right? She has a similar relationship with Donna Troy, even though Donna Troy wasn't ever really her sidekick. And she does have that relationship with Captain Sandspark. I think it is really important to Wonder Woman as a character to highlight that. And so I think she should have a child sidekick.
Knight?
So I have really been enjoying the Super Twins. I think it also works well because they are functionally bulletproof. So it's a little bit easier for me to watch them be in danger, because I'm like, okay, there's no kryptonite here, fine.
It's like, let kids run wild at the park.
Yeah, it's like everything's childproof. It's fine.
Yeah. The world is childproof to them. Unfortunately, the world is not super twin proof.
But Rena, you brought this up. Who were you thinking of?
I mean, like, I hate to be a broken record here, but ever since I was a kid watching the Young Justice cartoon, I was like, okay, every founding member just has a kid sidekick. When is there going to be a little kid with a lantern ring showing up?
What? You were inaudible.
A little kid with a lantern ring showing up is my thing, right? Because you had Superboy, you had the only one was missing was, like, other than that was, like, Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman got one too. I was like, why is there no kid from, like, the Maid 7? And We got a little bit with Teen Lantern. I didn't like the book that she was moved to Green Lantern in, and I generally don't love the concept of Teen Lantern, even if the character itself has done some interesting things with it. But I think we were talking about how kids can't have to be stopped, right? And I think that you have a really easy built-in reason to why you have a kid sidekick, which is like they don't get to choose who gets a ring. And I've been reading a bit more of Aricia, and I've been missing the kind of like rookie aspect of it, the kind of viewpoint character that I think really, really is the reason why Hal got aged up. I think without Aricia, Hal isn't aged up, and you see that when in the books where he's back on Earth and he isn't really hanging out with Green Lanterns anymore, he feels younger. And I think, like, honestly, I'd be fine with bringing back Kid Aricia somehow, some way. But if you can't do that, I think it would be really cool if you just had, like, it doesn't need to be a Green Lantern ring, like a Blue Lantern ring, a fucking Yellow Lantern ring comes down, is given to a kid.
God, Sorrow Lantern.
No.
It's
No.
emo 15-year-old.
We can't be topical or we're going to be late on the jump, all right?
I must recite my lantern oath. Crawling in my skin!
That fits for an emo kid. The point is, like, you get a kid with a lantern ring, and then you have a lantern be like, this is fucked up, but they can't stop it, so they have to, like, make sure the kid is, like, safe and, like, remembers their little protective shield when they go into space and doesn't go to alien planets alone and catch a yellow plague like Guy Gardner did.
Poor guy.
And you're like, okay, keep your, like, willpower up so that when they shoot a tank at you, you'll be fine, and all that stuff. Because if there's one thing that kids have in abundance, it's being stubborn.
So we talked about Knight, you talked about the idea of having to make sure the kids are safe, but sometimes it's not safe for a kid. You're going to get situations like Stephanie Brown being beaten to death by Black Mask, Jason Todd being beaten to death and then blown up by the Joker. I'm sure there are other sidekicks who don't belong to Batman who have also died, but like...
They're mostly... Bucky Barnes, getting killed by, I assume, Nazis.
That was, but yeah, like, there are lots of times where teen sidekicks have actually died, and you have to wonder about that because they literally just brought it back recently with Spider-Boy being killed off in Spider-Man. And it's just like, that poses a natural consequence and danger to these kids, and you can argue that bringing superhero kids into these comics is going to make the comics more lighter and more sillier because you're going to have these kids running around, but you equally have the risk and danger that these kids are not going to be in silly little comics written about the kids' perspective. They're going to be written by people who hate children and want to, we're going to get somebody writing Stephanie Brown in that storyline where they say, kill the bitch. You're going to have situations like that in this thing, and is that something you actually want to see happen if kids, teen sidekicks, become more prevalent?
I mean, never let a bad writer get in the way of a good idea, I think. That's my opinion.
I want that on a shirt.
I think, bad writers will always exist, and I think that every idea can't be, ruined because of it. And I think it sucks, but I also do think it's not fully bad when you kill kids. Sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. When Damien died, right? That panel where he's he's jumping and he has the sword through his gut. That was a gut punch to read.
A gut stab, if you will.
Aqua Baby, famously, is my favorite dead kid of all time. Even Aquaman I cannot stress this enough. When Aquaman is given his perfect future, his parents are back together, he has his kid, he has everything. Aqua Baby ain't there. I can't stress that enough.
Oh.
I mean, that is a slap on the wrist in comics now. After they brought back Jason Todd, it feels like death is even more of a slap on the wrist. Since Jason's come back, Tim and Damien have each died and come back.
Tim never died. Tim never died. It was a fake out. He never fucking died. I will
Steph
die
also
on that
never
hill.
actually died. That was also a fake out.
No, Damien. Okay, but there's a difference between a retcon fake out and like there was never an intention to kill Tim. Is the thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah, well, Tim literally never died. He was kidnapped, and then his family was lame, and nobody looked for him, despite the fact that he looked for Bruce when Bruce was kidnapped through time.
Okay, and then of course and then of course Chip Zdarsky just killed Jason for 2 seconds.
Yep.
That was comedy.
It was absolutely comedy. But like, what I mean is like, so there's like, when that happens, there is also the possibility that next month that's going to not have been what happened.
I mean,
Or
yes,
even
but
next page.
That's still like. I know we talk as writers we need to kill our darlings, but I don't think we need to do that literally with children.
Like,
Well, but here's the thing. They can kill any character. That doesn't stop me from loving characters.
I mean, I think like when you kill a kid, the kid stays dead for longer because I think like every time you kill a kid, there's some level of malice. Like, is there an example of a kid just died to die? No. Like, there's always some level of it. Superboy, it's always so brutal. Superboy was killed. That was because of a rights issue. Bart was also kind of beaten to death. Like, they never just fucking like get disintegrated. There's always a bloody corpse left.
No, because like if you're going to kill a kid, you have to do more work to justify it, which means that like the death is inevitably going to take up more page time and be more brutal because it has to have some like important significance to the story because you're already breaking a taboo.
Well, then you get then you do get Wally not killing Inertia, and just freezing him as a time statue.
Okay, that's a bit worse than death.
The only reason why Wally didn't kill Inertia was literally he was like, he has the face of my cousin. I don't want to beat him to death. That was it.
Yeah.
He was totally okay with killing that kid. If that kid looked like anyone else but Bart Allen, he would be like 6 feet under. All right. And then Inertia does get beaten to death by the Rose. Well, not beaten, he gets shot to death with magic guns, but still.
I mean, the great irony of people who, as part of like their mission statement, is like, we do bad shit, but we don't mess with women or kids. Killing a kid.
Not Inertia.
Yeah, well, Inertia broke the rules. Inertia did that first.
Yeah.
You're not covered under the rogue rules if you break the rogue rules.
But okay, this brings up to the point of the dangerousness of kid sidekicks, but also there's the situation of sidekicks who enter into this without their the approval of the superhero in question, who just sort of run into this without question, but still end up becoming the sidekick to another superhero in this situation. You have to wonder, if that kid does die, is it the superhero's responsibility that this kid ran in without their there's the question of what that's a big question, I guess. Is the superhero actually responsible if they've told the kid repeatedly not to go? And if Mr. Incredible tells the kid, "Fly home, buddy, I work alone," and then the kid flies into a burning building and dies, is that Mr. Incredible's responsibility here?
It's a sliding scale. Like, in Superboy's Hawaii era, where he just cops like Clark's luck, if he dies, it's like, I'm sorry, the dude just did trademark infringement. I don't have a responsibility there. But like, just Jason Todd, I don't like. If you're working for a kid, you can't just say don't do that thing, because teenagers will still do that thing. You need to watch that teenager.
What about when Batman fired Stephanie Brown, and then she went off and did the storyline, and then she died? Because she's no longer technically his employee, because he fired her, is she no longer his responsibility?
Well,
No, she is still his responsibility. He left her alone in the Batcave in an emotionally vulnerable situation. Like, if he can claim ignorance all he wants, if he genuinely is going to tell anybody that, like, he didn't have a responsibility to make sure that she made it home safely, then he's a fucking moron.
also, like,
driven her home and then changed the locks.
he is keenly aware that Stephanie Brown was a hero for, like, years before. Like, he knew that him firing her would not be the end of her being in danger.
I got a timeout here.
I had a truck driving by. I didn't want to interrupt him with the audio. Repeat what you were saying just now.
The fact, like, let me think here. Stephanie Brown was a vigilante for years before Bruce Wayne, like, made her Robin. He was fully aware that firing her would not end whatsoever her being in danger as a vigilante. She would do it with or without it. And in that context, like, firing her only puts her in more danger.
Absolutely. And then also, with Stephanie Brown, it is a different scale of responsibility, right? Because, like, you can argue that Batman didn't have a responsibility to her when she was spoiler, but the moment that, like, Batman tells her dad that she's spoiler, like, I think at that point, her safety until she's an adult is very much on Batman's shoulders because he has already placed her in such a vulnerable position. Like, irregardless if she had ever been Robin.
I forget. Did Batman not know that her dad was a supervillain?
No, he knew. He knew. So, Batman, one of my side projects that I'll get to in 7 years when I have time, is I would argue that a key part of, like, Batman's mindset is he does idealize the relationship between parents and children. And so and I would argue that the key part of, like, why he has so much friction with Stephanie Brown is the fact that her dad is abusive, right? And she has no interest in pursuing a relationship with her father. And I think, like, that being confronted with that truth breaks Bruce's mindset in a way, and that is why they have so much friction, right? Irregardless of, like, outside of my own personal analysis of their dynamic, he is aware that her father is Clue Master from, like, the first time he meets Stephanie Brown, and he unmasks her to her dad because he thinks that, like, that will stop Arthur Brand from being a supervillain. Obviously, it doesn't.
Okay, to be fair, having read Clue Master in Justice League International, where he actually seems to be just kind of a normal guy, if that was your only perception of Clue Master until suddenly running into him and finding out that he has a daughter, I can genuinely believe why Batman would think this might be a wake-up call.
Okay, so I've prepared a silly question. I would like everyone to choose a sidekick. If we put all 4 of our sidekicks together, which of them is going to survive? Thunderdome! 4 sidekicks and 1 sidekick leaves!
You have unlocked...
I know exactly which one.
I do too. I know exactly who.
I'm choosing Rocket because Rocket.
Impulse.
Also Ra, the girl of the Super Twins.
The boy would get creamed. The girl, I think she's a survivor. She's scrappy.
Yeah, no.
Cassie Sandsmark.
Honestly, here's the thing. I think mine definitely. Here's the thing. Warworld was 2 arcs ago. They are still feral. Like, I think both of them could, but if, like, it was every
the boy is soft.
No.
Here's my argument for why Impulse is going to win this.
That I thought you were saying everyone, not just the 4 we put in. I was like, no. He'd be gone anyway by someone else. But I'm like, yeah, no.
No, here's my argument for why Impulse is going to win. He has 2 key signature abilities that are his distinct thing: speed learning and intangibility. Like, intangibility is basically his signature. Like, yes, every other speedster can do the vibrate your molecules to make everything pass through you, but that is basically his signature thing. Every comic in his run involves him relying on the intangibility ability to just let everything going through. He is going to, on impulse, dodge everything that is coming at him. But also, speed learning was literally written to be his signature speciality in terms of any other speedster. He is going to quickly learn and adapt to every other ability every other sidekick is going to have in this Thunderdome. He is going to be dodging and staying as far away from every problem he can come up with until he learns every single thing he needs to do to terminate your weakness.
Or until a bird distracts him.
Okay, I do not believe... Okay.
Miranda, you have not presented yours, by the way, is the thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
she said Stephanie.
Mine, Cassie Sandsmark.
Oh, I think you said Stephanie.
No,
Cassie Sandsmark.
No, yeah.
I said Wonder Girl.
Cassie Sandsmark, I remember now.
Oh.
My thing here is, other than the heat vision, the only thing that can beat up Rocket is punching, which is like the thing she's immune to. So...
Oh, okay, but the thing is she immune to someone phasing right through her and, like, pulling her out of her own force field?
I don't know if that would work. I legitimately don't know if that does, but I think, like... here's the thing. Speedsters I'm not going to say they're stupid.
They are stupid. Speedsters are fucking broken. That's why I picked Impulse here.
They don't work because, like,
they break the laws of physics.
Impulse is going to forget that he has, like, 2 trump cards, and he's just gonna run around and be like, and pause to have a one-liner, and Rocket will deck everyone.
Okay, but the thing is you guys are bringing up he'll get distracted, he'll forget. That's literally the inciting premise of every single issue in his run, where he will run into danger, get immediately distracted, but before anyone can capitalize on him being distracted, he's already intangible. You can't outspeed his intangibility. He does it, like, literally on impulse.
Fine, Impulse wins because...
I win! I'm the winner!
Those boring. Oh, God. Miranda, you have awakened some memories of debating who would win in my teenage years. Okay.
But okay, the question ultimately now becomes, since we've resolved the secret question and all of our sub-questions, who is the Bizarro? Answer now below. Comment below right now before we reveal who you think the Bizarro of this episode was. Rena, who do you think the Bizarro was?
I think it's you. That's my opinion on that.
Okay. Knight?
I think Rena. There was something Rena said earlier about Teen Lantern where I was like, but that doesn't fit with what she's already said about the way about, like, can't stop them, and about, like, how a teenager on the core is just a terrible idea.
Miranda?
I'm also gonna say Rena. Again, Teen Lantern raised some red flags.
All right. I'm also gonna go with Rena. I'm just gonna dogpile on Rena here. All right. Now we're going to reveal who is the Bizarro of this episode. With a real Bizarro, please stand up. With a real Bizarro, please stand up.
Me and
Bizarro. I was completely bullshitting this whole episode.
Oh, wait, you, Knight, and you, Honey, were...
Oh, Knight, were you also Bizarro?
Yep.
Okay.
Not Bizarro, by the way. I just...
Like,
the reason I want a sidekick for Green Lantern is because I don't like the sidekick they currently have. They don't do anything with Teen Lantern, and she's kind of boring. I'm sorry.
I love Teen Lantern. I had to stop myself because I have not read that particular Green Lantern run. I love her in Young Justice. The Young Justice comic that she debuts in is horrible. It's a terrible comic. But she is, like, the one shining spotlight of good in that horrible run.
I got, like, 3 issues to that run. I'm so sorry.
The only issue in that run I recommend is just her solo origin issue. It's such a good issue. But yeah, I love Teen Sidekicks. I think they're amazing. I love having teenagers in my comic books. I think they, Kid Omega, Damien, Lorzod, I love it when teenagers are absolute dickheads. I love the dynamic and moral complexity that superheroes can offer. I love the heart-wrenching angst that happens when a teenager does die in a storyline. Just like, I love teen superheroes. I absolutely wish they were able to come back.
And Knight, your opinion?
All right, so it's not that I don't like teen sidekicks. Kid sidekicks are where, like, older teens, I'm like, fine, whatever, risk your life. Kids, I'm like, no, must protect. And so, like, it gives me anxiety seeing children in, like, I agree with most of what you guys said, but, like, the one part where it was really hard for me to even hide, like, my own beliefs was when we were talking about the, danger, right? And child death. So I had to, death is a slap on the wrist. And I'm like, no, but I still have to see it.
I think death for children are probably the least slap on the wrist. I stand by that because
That's true.
you need a reason to kill them. The way I knew Honey was bizarre from the very beginning because Honey was saying in the 40s, 60s, and 70s there was a reason for it, but nowadays writers aren't worth it. And I know for a fact that if Honey doesn't like something in the 21st century but likes something from like the 80s past, she will just pretend that modern comics don't exist and enjoy all the tropes in there. I was like, okay, I see.
I mostly hid my opinions behind a wall of pessimism and the double layer of the question isn't do I like kid sidekicks, the question is do I want them to come back, and I do want them to come back with better writers.
That being said, I do actually very much like the Super Twins. Once again, because they're bulletproof.
I do realize that we're saying, should there be more sidekicks in an era where Trinity and the Wonder Twins have been introduced?
Yeah.
Trinity's not a sidekick.
She's also not a teen, really. Like, I guess she's a baby and an infant in the Amazon's Attack storyline, and then she's a full-grown adult in the future.
Alright, that's fair. I did not know she was a full-grown adult. I didn't know that.
She's like 18 or so, 17.
Alright.
But okay, this was this episode's thing of Crisis of Infinite Opinions. Try to come see us every month where we release a new episode. On the each episode will come out on the first of every month. For each episode, we will be releasing a reading list so you can keep up to date with us as we talk. As well as the next week, we'll be discussing a backup feature where we will cover a topic that we didn't really have enough time to talk about in this episode. You can find me here on this channel as well as on Twitter on Honeyham17. Miranda, how can they reach you?
Well, if you'd like to reach out to me, I am DinoMightyMiranda on TikTok. I repeat, Dino as in dinosaur, Mighty as in Mighty Mouse Miranda, that's my name, don't wear it out. I am your friendly neighborhood amateur Batman historian. Additionally, I go live on TikTok twice a week on Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Knight, where can the people find you?
You can find me on TikTok, Threads, Twitter, allegedly, and Tumblr at Werewolf Teacher. Yeah, I think that's it. Rena, where can they find you?
Hello. You can find me on TikTok as RockArt3. There's no S. The S was taken. I also live stream at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday at, not 8 p.m., 9 p.m., apology, on the Ashley Dotson Friends live stream. And then me and Miranda every other live stream talking about the history of comics in the context of Green Lantern and Batman, our hyperfixations, and how we read trends in comics via them.
All right. See you all next time.